Hi everyone, I'm Irma from Visual Composer and I'm here today to show you our first case study, aka an interview with Michael Bellina, who is the owner of the New Jersey-based digital marketing agency, Migman Media. He's going to tell you how they use Visual Composer in their agency and why they chose Visual Composer in the first place, the typical workflow that allows them to deliver websites in 1 to 2 days or even until lunch, and some tips for web creators just getting started, and more about the life in a web agency. Before we start, you can also read the main points of this case study in our blog post. Enough of me, here's Michael Bellina.
And we've used, and prior to Visual Composer, a lot of what we did was hand coded with using like Bootstrap or something like that. And then as Visual Composer kind of became more and more robust, I started using less CSS to do stuff and more Visual Composer. So right now, I would say the last 3 or 4 websites that I put together have been pretty much strictly Visual Composer websites. I pretty much have a base template, a base WordPress template. It has no design. It's called Blank Slate. Make sure if you use it, give him some love because he looks for donations. So I throw one every now and then.
Okay.
And then I just build, and I just install Visual Composer, and then I start to build the headers, the footers, and all that kind.
By the way, the Visual Composer starter theme is a lightweight and a free theme, perfect for starting your work with Visual Composer with just the bare minimum. So Visual Composer can do the rest. So back to the interview.
I find Visual Composer to be intuitive on what you want to do, and it's easy to train because one of the things that I do um, is a lot of the websites I do, I hand over to the clients, and the clients are now kind of do all the updates to it. So I have to kind of bring them through the process of how to update the sites using Visual Composer. And a lot of them are just like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's simple enough. Yeah, so it helps me from the development standpoint. It also helps my clients.
When you work with these typical size
Mhm.
websites, do you have already some kind of established process, like a workflow that you typically follow? Do you already like
Mhm.
save templates or bits and pieces that you can reuse? Do you do something like that?
Once we kind of start the design process, we usually wireframe it out and get the
Mhm.
elements in the right spot. We do an actual design, a graphic design. I have one of my designers take care and design the site,
Right.
and then I take that design and then we develop the site, and that's kind of where the beauty of Visual Composer comes in because there's always like, okay, you make the margin a little wider, and rather than going in and updating 7 lines of CSS, you can just kind of drag the thing over a little bit and kind of copy and paste stuff and get it to go. So it does make so what I found that it's a lot easier
Mhm.
to build a site in the spirit of the original graphic design with Visual Composer as opposed to what I had done in the past, which was
Mhm.
lots and lots of different uh, CSS and div tags and classes and stuff
Right.
like that to get things to do what you want it to do.
What is your typical kind of delivery time, and did you see that maybe speed up when you started working with Visual Composer?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about.
Mhm, mhm,
Because and I'll explain. My work
mhm.
goes a lot quicker with Visual Composer. Like when
Right.
it's time for me to sit down and say, okay, it's time to build a website. Um, that simple site that I had mentioned to you, 6 to 10 pages, I could usually put that together in a day,
Mm.
maybe a day and a half.
I
Now, the total length of time that it takes to actually to put a website together depends on the client, and that could go anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 months, depending on the client. So,
Right. Did you ever have any cases where you worked on a longer period where people were hiring you to sort of be their, you know, long-term
Mhm.
website consultant or something like that? Did that happen too,
Yeah,
or?
yeah. Typically, what ends up happening, in some cases, I've had where I've inherited a site,
Uh,
been brought on like as a consultant, and then eventually took over the redesign of the site
I
because
see.
based
Okay.
on the stuff that we had been doing, whether it's been SEO or digital marketing, whatever the case is, the current site is either outdated or just in such disrepair, or
Hmm.
that they kind of need a new fresh start. And they want a new fresh start because they're starting these campaigns. They're really trying to start to drive traffic. It's just like anything else. You live in your house, you don't think much about it, but as soon as you think you got company coming over, all of a sudden you're like, you know what, maybe I should dust the top of that shelf. Been
Oh
looking
my
at
God,
that for
yeah.
weeks.
That's a really great metaphor. I'm like that. Like everything's fine until I have guests.
Mhm.
What do you feel what sorry, Visual Composer does better than the competitors like Elementor or maybe Divi and so on? And what do you think yeah, can be improved basically?
The one thing that I do like about Visual Composer that
Okay.
there's usually the what do they call them, the little plugins that they have.
Mm,
There's usually, I would say, in most cases, there is a solution for it within that frame.
mm,
Others are very limited. They have your basics, they have some stuff, but Visual Composer has a wide breadth of different solutions. I'll give you a quick example.
oh yeah.
One client wanted a counter or a countdown
Mm,
counter or something like that on their site or something of
oh,
that nature. And there was one available on Visual Composer. Now it
mm,
could have used a little bit more um, being able to kind of fine tune the design. Now I understand that
mm,
I was able to, just because I have the skill, I was able to do it with CSS. It's not that big a deal, which having that ability as well within Visual Composer is great. Now I don't have to have a separate style sheet. I could just kind of load it all in Visual Composer, which is
mm,
great. So that one I do like, that the breadth of different elements that are both
mm,
incorporated with other plugins, and both that they have natively, makes it easy because, like I had said at the very beginning, when a client's like, well, I kind of want to do this, you want to, it's like you don't want to have to spend a lot of time either creating it yourself, trying
mm,
to find a plugin, and you can just say, okay, here it is, and there it goes, and we're ready to
right.
rock. And I would say, like I said, in 99% of the time or 90% of the time, it's fine as it is. There are
Mm,
there might be minor tweaks here or there, which you could either do in the panel interface, or if I
mhm,
have to, I'll do it with CSS. It's not that big a deal. So
mhm,
that's, it minimizes the amount of work that I have to do if I could just do that. So I would say that's probably the biggest strength with Visual Composer. You don't have to go into separate um, interfaces
screens,
every time to
interfaces.
change the sizes. It's all kind of laid out for you, which I think is great.
That's lovely. Question. Um, Apart from Visual Composer, when it comes to building websites, what other maybe plugins or tools do you kind of rely on, and how do they help you scale your work?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, like I had mentioned to you before, about the plugin to duplicate pages. I use that a
Hmm.
lot.
Hmm.
Um, that's one of the that's like a key thing. I use obviously a form builder. I believe it or not, I use Contact Form 7, in which there are easier ones.
Hmm.
There's tons of them out there. I like that one because you could customize the form a lot
Hmm.
easier because it's very
Hmm.
basic. And that's kind of the thing that I like with certain things, is like, if it's either got to do what it's got to do, but it's also got to have a lot of customization, because
Hmm.
I understand the limits, but my clients don't. So
Yeah.
that's important to me. I think I mentioned at the very beginning, when I start to build the site, I basically use a very blank theme. I don't use anything that has any
Hmm.
styling. It's pretty much the pages. And what I do, actually, I do cheat a little bit.
Oh yeah.
What I do is I load in this blank theme, but what I do is I have a child theme that I built myself. And what
Okay.
that does is I load that in, because what that does is it helps modify the pages so it's easier to work with Visual Composer. So
Right.
I do have a little, so I do cheat a little bit with that. It's not
Oh, it's a
strictly,
hack,
but
not a cheat.
yeah, a hack. Okay, I like it. Yes, it's a hack. It's kind of
Yeah,
a
exactly.
gateway to make sure that everything works better. Other things that I use, yeah, like I said, those are usually the it's usually
Mm,
the duplicator, visual composer usually goes in, and then depending on what the client wants, if they're e-commerce, I use WooCommerce.
mm,
That usually goes in next. And then it's just some, modifications like Yoast I had mentioned before for
oh
SEO
yeah.
if I'm doing
Hmm,
that kind of
hmm,
stuff. I use that a lot too to help, with the tags and all that kind of stuff. It makes it a lot easier.
hmm, hmm, hmm.
Um, but yeah, those are probably like the three
Oh.
biggest ones, and it just depends on
Mm,
what the client wants. Like sometimes I'll use like a slider
mhm,
plugin.
mhm. I want to ask you, would you like estimate how much faster, like quantitatively, you can kind of deliver than before, or even just an estimate?
I would say probably about probably I save about maybe a third to
Mhm.
half of the time, depending on it depends on the complexity of the site.
Mm,
But I can say that like sites that because I worked with this one person for a while, and he has his designer who basically designs in the same way. So I can use him as a benchmark because I've done it the
mm,
old way, so to speak, and I've done it the new way.
mm,
There have been, and he has for a similar size site,
mm.
the old way, if you will, would take me probably most of the day, maybe a little bit into the next day, just to kind of final tweak it.
Right.
In some cases with Visual Composer, I'm delivering it right after lunch. That sort of
Amazing.
like I start on it first thing, maybe, whatever it is, check my
Uh-huh.
email and get started. I would say the site is pretty much wrapped up by lunchtime. And
Mm,
then I just go through some final tweaks, check the mobile site and stuff like that. He has it
mhm.
by mid-afternoon.
That's like the same day or day after?
It's no, the same day.
The same day.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, just.
So that would be like the first half of the day would be just building the template of the site because it's
Mm,
all kind of customized.
mm,
Now it's like maybe an hour, two tops, and I have everything
amazing.
I need. Now I'm just plopping in the information. So that's the rest of the time. And depending on the size of the site, I can have it, like I said, I can have it to them by lunch. I can have it to them a little after lunch. Sometimes it take a little bit longer, depends on the complexity, but I would say, yeah, it saves, I would say, yeah, it's much, much faster.
By a third. Like, what would you recommend to, novice, rookie web creators, web developers that are starting today? What kind of recommendations would you give, or maybe even to yourself, if you were to start today? What kind of recommendations would you give to yourself? Like, name three, or even just one. I mean.
Stuff. If you're going to be a WordPress developer,
Mm,
what you don't want to do is have your sites obviously look like other people's sites. And that's what the benefit of
mhm,
having a good underlying development um, tool, because you want to be able to customize.
right.
And I think that's one thing
Mm,
that provides value, obviously. But the other thing is too is that, and I get this a lot,
mm,
is the clients will think they could do it themselves, and they can.
mhm,
There's plenty of tools out there. They can even go to WordPress.com and do their own thing. But what something like Visual Composer does is that you could say, well, it may take you all week or all month to do this. I could turn this around for you in 2 days or three
mm,
days, depending on the site. So yeah, so there's a time factor, and you don't have to do it. So there's value in that. And
mm,
and I think that's it's like, what is your time worth? If you really
mhm,
want to sit
mhm.
there and work on it, hey, some people are just like that. Yeah, well, they reach a point where they can't figure it out
Exactly.
because even though, and that's the other thing too, as much as these Visual Composer and all of them are really good tools, you need to know the basics, because
Exactly.
no matter how good Visual Composer is, there will always be a
Mm,
situation where I'll need to customize it, because clients will be clients. And that even though they want it, even though it looks perfectly fine, they want to make sure that the spacing between the menu items is like this big, even though
exactly.
it's looks stupid, but that's what they want. Yeah, and so you have to know. So regardless of these tools, you have to
Mm,
know how to do the basics. You need to know HTML. You need to do CSS. If you can learn a little bit of PHP, God bless you. You know, that because that gives you even more, because there's a lot of times where you're just like, you need to customize, you know, and
Right.
that's
Troubleshoot.
it. So
Mhm.
yeah, so that's the thing. Don't forget about the basics, because regardless of what you use, you're going to come back and you're going to need them.
That was Michael Bellina from Migman Media. Make sure to subscribe and follow our social media accounts so you don't miss the next video in our series, where we showcase how web creators actually use Visual Composer in their day-to-day lives, and hopefully you will learn something new and improve your processes. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next one.